Hi, and welcome back to the 2023 Patterns for Pirates Holiday Freebies. I'm super excited today to show you something that literally has shown up in my feed like a million times since I first talked about making these. It is the Dino Nugget pillows. They are absolutely adorable. I'm so excited. I think these are going to be such a hit with our customer base, and I think it's going to, well, our sewing community. And I think it's going to be such a huge hit with all the people that are going to be receiving these as gifts this year. So the only things you need are pretty simple. We've got 5 different pattern shapes for these dinosaurs. You can make as few or as many as you want. There's a T-Rex, Stegosaurus, Brontosaurus, Pterodactyl, and Triceratops. And they are all the traditional nugget shapes that you would find in your chicken McNugget meal. So that's why we picked what we did, and I think they're adorable, and I'm so excited. So for your supplies that you just need your pattern pieces. You need some type of fabric, whether it be fleece or you can use this Sherpa to give it more of a chicky nug kind of look to it. You can use, honestly, quilting cotton, anything that you want to stylize, because I mean, honestly, they're just dinosaur shapes, so you could just make dinosaur little stuffies if you wanted to and not have to make them the Dino Nugget style. You'll also need some cutting tools, so your rotary blade or scissors, depending on how you like to cut things out, and then you're going to want some pins or clips. I completely recommend using clips this time around because this, especially if you're using a thick fabric, because pins are harder with this. It's just easier to grab it if you're going to be clipping with what we're doing. So let's get started. You do need, for whichever dinosaur you're creating, you need to cut 2 mirror images of the shape that we're using. And today, I think we're going to be cutting let's do a Triceratops. Let's make one together. And of course, I forgot to mention that you will be needing some sort of fiber fill to stuff your dinosaur with. There's a ton of brands you can get. Craft version of it is totally great to use. You could also recycle it from an old stuffed animal that is beat up and abused and you don't want anymore. You can also take fabric scraps and cut them up and use it as like filling for these as well. So however you want to stuff it, but you will need some of this for each of the dinosaurs that you're going to be making. I wanted to give a little tip about cutting out these Dino Nugget pillows because they're all funky shapes and lots of curves and lots of, the leg pieces and the tails and all that dip in. When I actually cut the entire outer thing with a really rough cut. So I'll do it with my rotary tool, do it with scissors, whatever it is. But I cut just kind of around all of the big pieces in like a real, kind of even pattern without dipping in too far. And then I come back with my scissors and I cut the more intricate parts. And that way you're able to get like a cleaner cut that way. And it's a little easier for you to be able to get all of those points and all of those extra little curves that we added to the pattern, just like with this Triceratops here. So I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera because it's no fun to watch me cut things, but that's just how I cut all of my pattern pieces. I do it, and not all of my pattern pieces, all of my ones for the Dino Nugget pillows. I cut around just with a general shape, and then I go back in with scissors and cut all those little points out. This will be a super quick tutorial, so I'm excited to just show you how quick and easy we can whip these up. For any of the dinosaurs, whichever shape you picked, I've got the Triceratops here. You're going to need 2 pieces that are cut in mirror image. And we're just going to go ahead and get started with this one right here. They're lined up next to each other with the right sides facing each other. And we are going to sew around the entire outer edge except for, clip these pieces together so when I take it to my machine, it's not going to wiggle apart and get all out of alignment. We're going to sew around the entire edge using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we need to leave a turning hole so we can turn it right side out and be able to stuff it and then sew the seams back together. So I like to pick a part that has like the straightest edge that has the longest space from leaving my turning space. So I'm just going to leave it up here about, like, let's say 3 inches, 4 inches. So I'm going to be sewing around this entire thing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, leaving just a 3 to 4 inch section open over here. And I just want to make sure before we sew that you know to take the entire 1/2 inch seam allowance. I can draw it a little bit because we won't be able to see through this fluff. So on my piece here, when I say take the entire 1/2 inch seam allowance, I mean on all these points, we want to make sure that we go up and into where the seam allowance should be. So I obviously am not measuring this because I'm drawing it by hand, but if you see, we want to take it all the way up and into it, and then that way our shape will be retained and it will be exactly what it's supposed to be. Otherwise, if you don't take the whole thing, it gets a little wonky. So like if you can see my drawing lines here, you want to go up and into every single curve, and then that way we get the full seam allowance and we get that full beautiful shape of our cute little our cute little triceratops. So hopefully my crude drawing here will help you understand what I mean when I say full seam allowance. I will also tell you that Sherpa is not for the faint of heart. It is really cute, but woo, it fluffs to death, and you'll have sometimes your machine will not love it. I recommend stitching at a longer stitch length than like the normal. I think my typical one is 2.5. I usually go up to 3.5 or 4 for this because it needs that for the thicker fabric. So here we are. We've got our outline sewn except for this turning point here. And we're going to want to go back through with our scissors and clip into these points and get as close as we can without actually clipping through any stitches. If you do clip through stitches, go back to your machine and stitch that back up so it doesn't open up on you. But anywhere that there is a point, you are going to want to clip into it. Otherwise, when you turn it, it's not going to look right. It'll look quite flop or funky. So here we go. We've got all of our points clipped. Now, if you have a fabric that isn't as wild as Sherpa, you may even want to take pinking shears or scissors and clip around all of these corners to make a smoother corner, or all these curves. But for mine, you're not going to be able to tell because we've got this Sherpa. So I'm going to leave it. Anyway, so after we clip, our next step is just to turn this puppy right side out. It's not really a puppy, it's a triceratops. Turn this Dino Nugget right side out. And you want to push out all of the edges so it has its proper shape. And these nuggets are a little funky on some of the points, on some of the shapes, so just do the best you can and get them all turned right sides out. Push that tail out. You can use a turning tool if you want to. But here is our triceratops, and they are looking pretty good. And now we are going to take our fiber fill or whatever you're using for stuffing, and we're going to push it into the opening and fill this. Now you don't want to overfill it. You never want to overfill any of your things because it kind of gives it a bloated look. And these are more plushies than they are anything else. So, you know, you make the decision how much you want to put in there, but I like to just keep it, you know, like rounded, but not to the point where it's overstuffed. And I think you'll tell when it's overstuffed. So we just push it in there, get all the stuffing. And honestly, with this fabric type, it It really doesn't take too much stuffing because the fabric is so fluffy on its own. It kind of retains the shape without too much work. But I go in and I do the tail and I get the feet and the head and I do the body, like the full body part last. Just kind of, there probably is an art form. I was going to say there's no real art form to stuffing our triceratops. And I'm just going to add a little bit more until you decide that you like how it's fluffed up. I think it looks pretty good. So the last thing that we've got to do is just close this hole. Now you can do it a different number of ways if you want to be a little more professional about it. You want to make sure you fold in your seam allowance here. This is for everybody. And here we'll add a couple of clips. Now you can hand stitch it closed, so it's a blind stitch. If you don't mind having visible seams, I know a lot of people don't, you can go through and stitch it with your machine. Just however you want to close it up, you can. I prefer the blind stitch, but because it makes it look more uniform across the board. But however you want to stitch it up is up to you. Let's go stitch it. All right, we've sewn it all up. We've got all of the parts closed and it's fully stuffed and it's ready to be loved. Now you can follow these exact same directions for all the 4 other pieces and make an entire collection of dinosaur chicken nuggets if you want to. I hope you love this pattern. I hope you found the tutorial to be helpful and I am so excited to see what you make. I hope you share with us. Tag us on Instagram, TikTok, share it on Facebook in our group and let us see what you made. And we hope that you have a happy holidays.